Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining another one of our Coffee Break Technology series. This is a first for us, and we're very excited to have some guests join us that are not Elevity employees. And so very excited to have Jake and Matt from Carex Consulting Group. And we're here to talk about something that is it's just crazy right now, is just technology talent trends, the challenges associated with finding good people that want to stick and stay part of an organization, and just kind of the evolving situation that's happening right now as it relates to that. And I talk to a lot of organizations every week, and I've not talked to anyone that says, really, that's interesting. We haven't experienced that. It's happening to everybody, and we're excited to have a conversation. So want to introduce Jake Saginski and Matt Duffy from Carex. Guys, thanks again for joining. We're super excited to have you here. We're excited to partner with you guys to help find good talent. So Matt, maybe you could just start by giving us a quick little introduction and background.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Jeff, and we appreciate the opportunity. So my background, I've been in the field of talent acquisition for over 20 years. That includes leading internal corporate talent acquisition recruiting teams, as well as third-party agency recruiting. Also sit on the board, president of the Wisconsin Recruiters Network, and sit on the board of the National Recruiters Network. So kind of able to get a pulse of nationally what organizations are seeing and struggling with from the sense of talent acquisition. My role with Carex is I'm the vice president of partner success, which is essentially engaging with our partners to make sure that we're delivering on the recruiting promises that we make.
Okay, great. Thank you. Jake.
Yeah, good morning. And thank you. I'd like to echo Matt's thanks. Thanks for having us, Jeff. I've always been very impressed with all of our interactions with Elevity, and we're grateful to work with you all on finding tech talent. Again, Jake Saginski. I'm the Vice President of Partner Growth here at Carex Consulting Group. Did my undergrad and MBA here at the UW and Wisconsin School of Business, and I've been in the Madison and Wisconsin markets ever since. Been in HR and recruiting for about 18 years. I started recruiting right out of college and have been in mostly client partner-facing roles in different capacities since, in staffing, consulting, and a little stint in higher ed. My role here is focused on building relationships. Our goal at Carex is to really improve and simplify the talent journey. I mean, the way we look at it, working is really the single biggest time investment we make in our lives. So where you work really matters, and Carex wants to create career matches, not just fill jobs.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Welcome. That is an interesting thing when I have spent some time on the website, and just that whole concept of career matchmakers. Is a true thing that happens every time that I'm looking to fill a role. We're looking for that right fit, but in order for it to be the right fit, we have to be the right fit for the employer or employee just as much. So that matchmaking does definitely resonate. So we have plenty to talk about. We're going to try to keep it within our 20 to 25 minute window that we always do for these coffee breaks. But we would really like to hear from you. If you have questions, if there's things that we are talking about that you'd like a little bit more detail on, do one of two things. Either you can raise your hand, I believe, in the Teams function, or you can type it into the chat function, and we will work to answer those. So please don't hesitate to pop a question in, and we can either answer that now, or if you'd rather, we can follow up with you and answer directly. So guys, let's get into some of this right away. I mentioned that I talk to organizations all the time, and no one has said that they're not challenged with trying to fill roles, trying to keep people. The employment challenge right now, I think, is universal. So what are you guys seeing? I know you guys look at a lot of data. This is what you do. What are you seeing out there? Why are we seeing some of these factors? And specifically, why are we seeing that in the technology space?
Great question. And yes, Jake and I are giving presentations on this almost on a weekly basis because they're paramount for everyone. For those of us who track the BLS and the monthly labor market reports that come out, and when I say those of us, I recognize I might be the only one. I actually read them on a monthly basis, and I was laughing with Jake earlier. Last week at the dinner table, I was telling my family about the new labor market trends, and my 11-year-old put his fork down and looked at me in very serious eyes and told me it was time to get a hobby, and he was probably right. But nonetheless, those of us who do track kind of the unemployment, the labor market trends over the past couple of years, it's been a roller coaster. So just at a macro level, when we look back to April of 2020, unemployment was a staggering 14.8%. Obviously, that's dropped over the years and over the months, but today national unemployment sits at 4%. Wisconsin unemployment is just 2.8%. And when you break out the field of information technology unemployment, it's just 2.6%. And it's an important data point to keep in mind because generally speaking, economists agree that full employment is about 3%. So when we look at IT unemployment and Wisconsin unemployment, both are under what's considered to be full employment. So, the labor market has changed so dramatically over the last 12 to 16 months. It's just a kind of a quantitative aspect. There's just not enough talent in the market. And when we look beyond just unemployment, there's a couple other data points that paint a picture. As we started the new year, there were 10.9 million open jobs in the United States. And in contrast, there's only 6.3 million unemployed individuals. And we're seeing a significant uptick in new IT jobs created, which just, it amplifies the labor constraint. So the macro data certainly suggests the labor market has changed dramatically. And we're seeing that really no more so than information technology. We started to see a huge uptick pre-COVID in new jobs created. That was obviously put on pause, early on in the pandemic, but we've come out of that in gangbusters, and new IT jobs are being created across the U.S. at never before seen rates.
Well, that's not helpful. That's not helpful information. I thought you were going to tell me that there's this, truckload of great IT talent that's just outside of town on their way in. And I know you guys are a Madison-based organization. So is Elevity with offices, in Wisconsin and throughout the Midwest. But it's not just a Madison or a Wisconsin issue.
Right.
It's definitely everywhere. So, when we talk about hiring trends, we're seeing that speed is critical. We're finding people who apply for jobs, and by the time, 4 hours later, when we say, "Hey, we got your application," they're not replying because I think they're hearing from everyone, or they're jumping on a quick job. What are some of the trends that you guys are seeing as you're looking to fill roles, and what are those challenges?
Yeah, I mean, you're exactly right, and I'll just kind of carry on what you were saying. So, I'll preface this comment of maybe articulating why some of these challenges are more paramount and why they might not change. When we look at hiring today, it's kind of the new era post-COVID in the sense that people ask, why is there such a challenge? And we like to call it market dilution. And to put that in perspective, pre-COVID, right, when Wisconsin-based employers were looking to hire jobs, the overwhelming majority of the time they were hiring local talent. So wherever that job was located, generally speaking, you're looking at candidates within about a 50-mile radius from where that organization was based. Well, today, with kind of the geographic landscape being open to remote, that has diluted the labor market considerably, which makes it really challenging for Wisconsin-based employers. To give you an example, what I mean by this. Very recently, we had a California-based company reach out to me and say, "Hey, we're looking to hire a developer. Historically, we've paid $150,000 for this developer, but we've done some research, and in the Madison area, the going rate is $100,000. So go find us someone in Madison. We can pay them $120,000, which is $20,000 more than the market demands in Madison, and we're still saving $30,000." On the surface, that's a win-win, but the problem with that is Wisconsin-based employers no longer can rely on that Wisconsin-based talent. Jobs, our talent is going to coast to find new jobs, which is also not only decreasing the number of talent available in the area, but it's also increasing the compensation demand quite considerably. So that speed to engage candidates is paramount, because what we're finding is when someone says, "Yes, I think I am going to look or consider a new job," today, this is more anecdotal than anything else, but today we're seeing at Carex, on average, candidates are considering approximately 3 jobs when they go to the market. So if you're talking to and or interviewing a candidate, it's a fair assumption that they are also interviewing with 2 to 3 other companies. So it's not just a game of engaging candidates. Speed is such an important factor.
Yeah, and the concerning thing from my perspective, which is, we hire great technology individuals and we put them in front of clients.
Right.
So it's critical that they fit into what Elevity is all about, and
Right.
kind of embody our values. And every organization has that. We just have a little brighter spotlight on that because they're out in front of our clients taking care of technology issues.
Right.
And so that whole concept of, wow, we're having a hard time filling roles, so we have to go faster, gives me heartburn. Because typically faster means we don't go through our typical processes to vet if somebody really does fit, because we want them to be here for a long time. We want to make a decision now and invite someone into our family for hopefully the rest of their career. So how are you coaching organizations to match that speed need, but also make sure that they're hiring correctly?
Yeah, that's the $1 million question, and it differs for every role in every organization. But a couple kind of core pieces of advice we always offer is, there's been this concept of needing comparison candidates. Like you want to validate that the person you're interviewing is the right fit, and you often do that to compare them against other candidates you're interviewing. Well, the concept of comparison candidates is really coming to a screeching halt because if the time it takes to hire or find candidate A, if you need to find candidate B, candidate A is likely going to be off the table. So, one thing we encourage is don't wait for comparison candidates. The second thing we always encourage is when you start a recruiting process, be explicitly clear about what that process looks like at the front end of the search instead of adding layers after candidates are identified. And be thoughtful about truncating that time as quickly as possible. One thing we're seeing organizations do is when they launch a search, they identify who the team is, the hiring team, and they're putting blocks on their calendar to allow room for interviews to take place well in advance of the search even starting. Because frankly, the biggest roadblock we see is all of us on this call, I'm sure, one of the biggest barriers to moving quickly is just the capacity of our calendars. They get booked up with meetings so quickly. So being more proactive and thoughtful about blocking calendars for interviews and not delaying it. The third thing that we're seeing some organizations do that makes an impact is be explicitly clear with candidates what the process looks like, so they're not caught off guard if it delays. If you let them know up front, it's going to be a 2 or 3 step process. We hope to have it run through within 10 days. It oftentimes anchors them in the process, and they're less apt to accept a new role before that process is seen through.
One other piece I can add to that, Matt, and sorry if you already covered this, but I think another good thing is to ask candidates about those other interviews and communicate with hiring managers just to let them know so that they aren't caught off guard. Obviously, it's smart to, as you mentioned, to kind of assume that that's happening anyway. But if all the expectations are clear and everybody knows what's going on, likely there'll be success in terms of if it's the right role for that person.
Yeah, I don't think either side wants to be pressured into doing something sooner than they're ready.
Right.
But if you wait too long, somebody's going to go a different direction.
Right. The other thing, Jeff, that I'll add on with that I've seen really make an impact is, we keep hearing about, what draws candidates is culture, the teamwork, right? We keep hearing culture outweighs compensation, culture is paramount, and it is true. But what we found is, every time someone's interviewing with a manager or leader, of course they're going to say it's a great culture. So what we've had a few partners do is, in parallel of the interview process with the hiring team, they're proactively setting up just meetings with who would be their coworkers, just the team, just so the team can articulate what a day in the life of that organization is. The culture, the teamwork, the camaraderie, and they're hearing kind of a positive influx of what it's like to work there from their team members. And we're really seeing that add value in the process, and it provides much more engagement with the candidate. They feel more a part of the team before an offer is even made.
That's good. Well, you mentioned the 2 C's that are critical: culture, which we would love everyone to feel is the most important thing, but compensation is definitely right there, if not 1A, it's 1B, and rightly so. That I think all of us, if we had the winning lottery ticket in our pocket, would question whether we're going to go to work the next day. We do this for the benefits and the things it provides our families and the work enjoyment. But that's obviously a huge factor. And when you have 4,000 or 4 million more jobs than people seeking them, that's going to have, just economics is going to push compensation up. So what are you guys seeing? What are some of the various tactics and strategies that organizations are using to work and deal with that? And where are you seeing some success?
Yeah, this is the most difficult topic that I have with candidates and partners is compensation. I'll give just a couple high-level data points to paint a picture. So, last year I think we saw the average kind of salary increase for individuals was about 3%, and in IT, I think the average salary increase, if they stayed with their current company, was anywhere from 3.5% to 4%. Now, contrast that with people who are leaving their organizations. People who are leaving their organizations, generally speaking, are seeing an average salary increase between 5% and 7%. In IT, what we're seeing through Carex is when people leave an organization, they're receiving on average anywhere from a 10 to 12% increase. So this is really just organically driving up the salary demands and all over, particularly in IT, which makes it hard because companies are being forced to pay more than they have, and it creates obviously internal equity issues. But the market is demanding that, right or wrong. That's what we're seeing play out. So what we're seeing organizations do, particularly small to mid-size, because they don't have the flexibility as a Fortune 500 company just to arbitrarily increase everyone's salary by 30%, which some organizations have done. I'm sure we've seen that in the news. So we're seeing organizations do the best they can with salary because salary does indeed matter. And we're encouraging organizations to do a market analysis when they're looking at internal equity. So if someone is asking for example, a 5% increase, look beyond that and say, if this person ended up leaving, what would the external market demand if we had to hire someone new? Oftentimes it's above that. So it's a delicate math game you have to play. But for organizations that just can't, again, increase a huge percent, we're really seeing that flexibility in culture lens come into play. People, it's a cliche and, overstated statement, but people really want to work for good, caring, flexible organizations. Particularly since COVID, one of the key drivers in candidate engagement and retention is flexibility in a very caring environment. So we're really seeing organizations, pay attention to that, not just compensation.
Yeah, and Matt, I can add to that too, in terms of when you're talking about culture and those other things. We talk a lot about total rewards, and obviously I always think about it as like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Compensation and health insurance, that's usually the bottom of the triangle, the core need that people focus on first. But there's so many things above that, those intangibles like culture, like flexibility, other types of benefits that, although you need to kind of be in the right spot for that comp, but looking above that, in the triangle, in the pyramid, really helps.
Yeah, and we can pause there. I'm not sure if there are any questions or specific issues that the folks on the call are addressing, or we could maybe touch on. Want to make sure we're certainly addressing any real-time issues on your end as well.
Yeah, haven't seen any, but I'm glad that you paused to ask that question. Feel free to post any in the chat if you would like to ask us something. But I was just going to follow up with Jake on that point about other things besides compensation that organizations are looking at, not as a distraction factor, but as we're at the tactics and strategies that organizations are using to attract. And then kind of conversely, or in comparison, which of those things are employees really gravitating towards and interested in?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. It depends on the organization, and there's ways you can measure that, whether it's through engagement surveys or through some analysis through a compensation partner. But, I think the important part of that question is find out what your employees value and put your resources there, because it's going to be different. It might be, I was just working with a partner who their comp isn't as high as some of their competitors. They're in the nonprofit space, but for the tech talent, that's hard to attract top talent. So what they do is they offer some other benefits like paying back tuition. But for a younger, maybe a greener candidate, that might be great. For somebody closer to retirement, that might not be as interesting as a additional contribution to a 401k or something. So, but I think spending the time to find out what your employees value is great. And then obviously with candidates as well, it's asking those questions and selling those points about your total rewards package.
Sure. Yeah, and that planning and thinking a little bit beyond just the open roles that we have now is important. You guys have talked in the past about workforce planning. Tell me a little bit more about what that is and how organizations could start to think differently.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite topics, and people hear about workforce planning and they often cringe because they think about some arduous multi-page spreadsheet that's just tough to get your arms around. But in my eyes, an effective workforce plan can be done on the back of a napkin within a minute. And essentially what it means is, organizations typically, and for the right reasons, they start the recruiting process when a need arises. So a new job is approved or someone resigns or retires, then they start the recruiting process. What we're seeing, though, is the time to fill kind of across the board in technology type spaces is about 60 days, which is an incredibly long period of time. So we work with a lot of organizations to identify what new products, what new services, what new geographies is on the horizon, and start pipelining candidates well before a role is ever approved. And it could even be 12 to 16 months before you think you're going to hire. But being a bit proactive about identifying where the candidates are, what their needs are, who is emerging in the field that would be, a fantastic hire, and getting well ahead of that. We often see recruiters or internal talent acquisition teams to segment a percentage of their time during the week or their month focused on roles that aren't even open. And that's easy to say, and it's difficult to execute, but that foresight into what roles are in the pipeline and associate time and investment in identifying candidates ahead of time makes a world of difference.
So do you guys see success with that with organizations that are, they're on some big upward trajectory, they're in biotech, they're ready to explode, and so they're thinking about those things more strategically and part of some planning? Or do you see that in organizations that maybe aren't growing as fast and can have a little more 3-year vision, maybe a little more accurately, and they know what that next 6 to 18 months looks like? Or is it, regardless of the organization's size and growth trajectory, it's just the organizations that think a little bit further ahead are the ones that are doing this?
It's really everyone. I'll give you a real life example. We're working with a team that has about a team of about 20. And at the most simple question, it's like, when is the next person going to retire? If Jane or John Doe is going to retire in 12 months, well, we know there's going to be at least one opening. You could also do some backwards math and say, all right, within your team, your retention rate is 10%. So we know historically we're going to need to hire at least 1 or 2 people just on natural attrition rates. And the impact of calling candidates in the market just to say, hey, we came across your information. We've heard you're, a really talented resource in this field. There are no openings with our organization, but we would like to build a relationship with you now to see if at some point we could find a home for you. That seems to make an incredible difference in the candidate engagement and acceptance rate if you're proactively establishing relationships with candidates before roles surface. So, again, you can get lost in the details of workforce planning, but at the most basic level, it's looking at forecasted retirements and annual attrition rates to plan accordingly.
Interesting. Good. Well, one of the reasons why everyone's interested in hiring is because they have openings. So this, the forecast and prediction of this great resignation was correct, and we're in it. So when did it start? And most importantly, when do you think it's going to end?
Okay. So I'll get, and Jake's probably already rolling his eyes at me, but I'll give you a couple answers, Jeff, and then Jake can step in and give a more real answer. So when did it start? In my perspective, it actually started in about 2018. And why I say that is when we look at the number of open jobs and the number of unemployed individuals, right around 2018 is when we saw that line intersect. And that was the first time in history that line crossed. And it's widening at an alarming rate. So it started in my eyes in about 2018. COVID put a pause on it, but it was already coming our way before COVID hit. Second part to your question is, when is it going to end? My perspective, and I don't mean to sound doomsday about this, but my perspective, it's not. And I say that on a couple of reasons. One is simply looking at the labor force participation rate. The LFPR is a really important indicator of number of available employees in the market. And today, the LFPR is at the lowest mark since the early 1970s. To put it more bluntly, we're seeing more people exit the workforce than are entering the workforce. And when we look at kind of the U.S. birth rates, we're just not populating enough people to forecast with the jobs that have been created. So I think this is probably decades that we're going to be dealing with this at some level. We're also seeing a fairly consistent stretch of over 4 million people quitting their jobs every month, which is absolutely staggering. So I think at some level, this is, not to use an overplayed term, but this is going to be the new normal. I think it could mitigate some, but I don't think the pendulum's going to swing back to what we've been used to pre-COVID.
One other thing I would add to that, Matt, and you made the point of this the other day, amplifying that problem, I feel like recruiting itself, trying to find recruiters to help you with everything we've been talking about today is extra challenging. When COVID happened and a lot of organizations had to thin out and downsize a little bit, people switched careers. And, back to your point about a numbers game, there's less people coming into the workforce. People have switched careers away from things like recruiting when those positions were eliminated. And it's just it's amplifying the problem even more to find quality talent.
Well, I was kind of waiting for you to have like a positive spin on this, Jake.
Yes.
Well, I think you're right. It's the new norm. It's the new reality. It's the new business challenge that we all have to, up our game to make sure that we're a place that people want to work and a place that people want to stay. The best way to not have recruiting challenges is to not have retention issues. So yeah, it's a great conversation. Probably could go on for twice as much time. And I think it is a topic that we'll get back after. We're developing a podcast, and we're going to do some other things that, where we can maybe jump into some of these topics a little bit more in depth. But really valuable conversation, really valuable content at a time that, we're all kind of faced with this right now. So thank you for that. Just to kind of wrap up a couple things, we have another coffee break event coming up in a couple weeks, March 11th. Boy, it's nice to hear about March being around the corner. Hopefully a little nicer weather. But we're going to talk about cybersecurity awareness. The thing that we've been talking about every other coffee break has to do with cybersecurity. And that's because it's a issue that we're dealing with on a weekly basis with clients that are having issues. So we'll talk about cybersecurity awareness training, how to do that in a way that is easy for your employees, easy for your organization. All security starts with your end users, making sure that they're making the right decisions on those emails that come through that just look a little odd. There's a reason for that. elevityit.com/events. You can see all of the things that we have going on. We've got some exciting things and fun things. We're actually going to be hosting an event with people, like real live people, where we can see them below the waist. Hopefully they'll wear pants. The Nets and Networks event here in Madison that we're going to be doing. There's some other things that are happening in and around our other locations. So check out elevityit.com events for anything that you would like to attend. We always offer, going the wrong way, a coffee card for attending. So hit this QR code or quickly type in this type form to download a coffee gift card. I will come back to this one when we finish. But Matt and Jake, just really want to thank you for your time. Great conversation, really impressive expertise on these topics, and shameless plug. Carex is a great organization to work with. Have found us some strong talent and have been a good partner. So thanks for joining. Thanks for all of that, and everyone. Hope you have a great weekend.